The American Psychiatric Association's DSM has been fundamental to the application of psychiatry all over the world, but it's not easy staying up to date with changes in our understanding of the mind and how to treat it. Here to discuss how the APA is staying up to date, I'm joined by Nitin Gogtay and Diana Clarke. Welcome. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it, so thank you.
You're welcome. We're glad to be here.
Our pleasure.
So we're talking about DSM. Just take me back a little bit. What is the practical use of DSM?
I've been a psychiatrist most of my academic career, as well as a clinical researcher and a clinical psychiatrist. And DSM provides the most crucial framework and a structural framework which you can base both your clinical practice as well as the clinical research on, because it allows all the clinicians as well as academic psychiatrists and mental health providers to speak the same common language. It provides the integral structural framework so that anybody across the world who's talking about mental illness and one or other specific condition is at least speaking with an understanding of certain common data elements. And that's why it's a crucial book to have.
But we know moving forward that nothing stays the same, and medicine certainly doesn't. So what are some of the trends, or what are some of the things that we need to take into account with DSM moving forward?
I think it's important for us to grow, for DSM to grow with the times, right? So with advances in whether it's genetics, neurology, we need to actually grow with that times. And so therefore, incorporating some objective measures of psychopathology. For example, one of the things that we've learned over time is that wearing some like active wear can actually monitor sleep patterns. And we know for a lot of mental disorders, sleep is an important symptoms. So that kind of data can actually help with diagnosis insomnia and also help to understand some of the other mental illness. So we need to change with those times. In addition, we know that social determinants of health are so important in how an individual present in their symptom, what they experience and how they present with their symptoms. So we need to take those things into consideration as well. And when I'm talking about social determinants of health, I'm talking about where we live, where we work, issues that we experience within the environment, for example, discrimination. All of those things impact on how we experience things and how we present for care. And so all of that information needs to be taken into consideration as we move forward.
Right, and I would just add that as the science and the information advances and more research takes place, exactly what Dr. Clarke said, the challenge is how do we bring it and incorporate it into the DSM and the future editions of DSM so that we maintain the objectivity, we maintain the purpose of helping a day-to-day clinician and in their clinical practice, as well as we advance the research in mental health.
What do we think the future of DSM is?
From my years of experience as an academician and a researcher and a clinician, a manual like DSM is critical. Psychiatry still remains a very subjective and abstract science, and DSM is a crucial effort that brings in a sense of objectivity and common data elements, as I said, into the field so that it can collectively advance the research as well as clinical practice. So the future of DSM will remain relevant and important as long as psychiatric research continues to advance. How we incorporate all the objective data that rapidly we are gathering into DSM is going to be the challenge, and it's where it needs to go.
Yeah. And still, while at the same time keeping the clinician the main focus, because it is a manual for research, but primarily a manual to help the clinician diagnose the patient and figure out how to treat them.
Final question, why come to your session on Monday?
As we're thinking about advancing DSM, I think it's really important for frontline clinicians to be part of that process. And Monday's session, which is a very interactive session, so we've changed it from being just a didactic session where we're presenting to the audience. We've decided to make it more interactive, I should say, where we present briefly and then we go to breakout sessions where we ask the participants to help us think through what are our next steps. Here are the 4 important topics that we're bringing up, and how do we look at that and how do we incorporate that into DSM moving forward.
I would say yes, and in addition, I would say this is our first step towards starting to think about where DSM goes next, and we want this done with the help of everyday clinician as well as academic researchers as well as everybody who is working towards advancement of mental health. And so this is one of the, we would hope, series of sessions that we would put together so that we'll start thinking about where should DSM go next and how should we make the changes that are necessary in the DSM.
Thank you both ever so much indeed for joining us today. Really appreciate it. It's such an interesting session, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure.